Hello, and welcome back to the Audible Finish, a weekly show discussing the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasi. Hello, Thanasi.
Hello, Dimitri. It's good to be here.
In this week's episode, we review WWE Crown Jewel, as well as the post-pay-per-view Raw, which saw the announcement of our first WarGames match at Survivor Series. Later on, we will also look into what happened over on AEW as they continue to build up the card for their Full Gear event that is less than 2 weeks away. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. All right, well, Thanasi, on that note, I want to do a quick recap of the Smackdown episode that played right before Crown Jewel. And I know that you're our Smackdown specialist, so do you want to take it away?
Let me do so. So very, very quickly. Opening segment. LA Knight and Roman Reigns have a promo. There are high tensions, but one of the lines that's a highlight is you're playing a cosplay, a redneck version of my cousin. This is what Roman says to LA Knight. He says that he's done nothing, and then Roman has turned this into a multi-billion-dollar industry. But otherwise, it was just a largely standard face-off with a low tension ending in spite of a high tension commencement. Kevin Owens took on Austin Theory, not on Crown Jewel, obviously, because these talent probably the competing talent are probably resting or traveling a bit during the taping. But I'm just glad to see Kevin Owens in action. And we get a spin-out fisherman suplex off the second rope, a pop-up powerbomb, and a stunner, which puts away Austin Theory for the W. Chelsea Green and Piper Niven take on Shotzi Blackheart and Charlotte Flair. Low-key, Chelsea Green is actually one of the best characters in the women's division. And I don't think she even really needs Piper, but she's worthy of the belt, certainly. Maybe if it was a mid-card, it'd be great. But the baby faces get the win on this one. We have a face-off between Solo and Cena. Heyman says Solo is a future chief. That's the first we've heard of this. And then Cena has a raspy voice that screaming at the end of sentences probably put him under strain. Or perhaps it was last episode when the Samoan spike went straight into his throat. Donnybrook match is the semi-main event. Brawling Brutes versus Pretty Deadly. And I've never seen Broken Glass used on WWE before, but all I could think when we saw that was EC, F and W, man. And we also get a table spot. Kit Wilson goes through the table, but Pretty Deadly get revenge because they hit a spine buster and neck breaker combo through another table for the pinfall victory. So good for them. We have a US title weigh-in. I don't know why this is happening because this is not boxing, but largely inconsequential, and it was a backstage recorded segment anyway. So there's really not, I wish I could say more, but there's really not that much to say. And in the main event, Bayley takes on Bianca Belair. Bianca hits the KOD for the win, and then puts Bayley through the announce table for good measure, trying to put her out before Crown Jewel. And that's our SmackDown recap, Dimitri. Back to you.
Okay, well, I'm going to throw to you very soon because I know that you took extensive notes on the pay-per-view. I did too, but I feel like I dominate a lot of the World Heavyweight Championship matches, and what opened our Crown Jewel event was the World Heavyweight Championship. So I figured I'm going to throw it to you, Thanos, to talk about the bout between Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre.
Thank you very much. I will very, very happily do that. So the World Heavyweight Championship match was indeed between Seth freaking Rollins and Drew McIntyre. And the crowd was largely chanting for the latter, which I thought was interesting to see. He actually performed early in the match a Ronaldo celebration, the C pose. And then, of course, as we get into the actual action, some of the highlights include the buckle bomb reversed into a future shock DDT. The suicide dive ended up exposing Seth's back problem, so Drew decided to smash him into the steel steps and then hit a sidewalk slam off the steel steps onto the apron to boot. Some additional highlights from the match. We get a super kick and curb stop combo for a 2 count, which were a counter to the Claymore. Seth misses the Phoenix Splash and Drew hits a Claymore. This one also got a 2 count. And then towards the end of the match, we get a pedigree and curb stomp as a counter to the Claymore once again. And that actually ends up getting the win suddenly for the working men's champion. I will just make this point briefly before I go on to what happened after this. it seemed a little bit like a smart mark crowd because they were chanting very loudly for Drew, very, very loudly. So I think maybe some of the other chants throughout the night might have revealed that a bit more of a smarky than usual Saudi Arabian crowd. But after this match finished, Judgment Day's music hits and Damian Priest struts to the ring. He's ready to cash in before Sami Zayn jumps in from behind, steals this briefcase, and spoils the party. And that is our opening fixture for Crown Jewel.
Yes, and I have to say I think in general it was the right call, and I especially think the right call in not having Priest successfully cash in like at all was the right call. Let him preserve it, let him hold it at least until the new year. If that's my preference. And I did notice the crowd was really hot for McIntyre, and I think that sort of made the finish feel a bit more tame than what it could have been. Because I know that for me, watching it live, the moment that felt the hottest was when the Phoenix Splash got reversed and immediately into the Claymore.
Yeah, that was a super good segment.
But the thing that elevated it is the fact that the crowd was so hot for it and they were ready for that 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Whereas once you got to the finish, it's like I was thinking to myself, if the moments were reversed in terms of the crowd reaction, then that finish probably would have felt fine. But because of that aspect, it just felt a bit like, oh, okay, now we're at the end.
It seemed deflated. Yeah, I agree with you.
But again, like a small critique. But all in all, I thought a very solid opening bout. Following that, we had the Fatal 5-Way for the Women's World Championship. So this obviously featured Rhea Ripley defend her title against Shayna Baszler, Nia Jax, Raquel Rodriguez, and Zoe Stark. I just want to bring up a notable shout out to Shayna Baszler, who at one point had Rhea Ripley, Raquel Rodriguez, and Nia Jax simultaneously in submission holds, which I thought was very nice. And she even had a moment where she powerbombed Ripley and Rodriguez, who at the same time superplexed Zoe Stark, which I thought, okay, so Shayna Baszler is getting some really nice offense in here. And obviously Rhea Ripley successfully defended, and I thought that was also a very nice moment where she riptided Zoe Stark off the middle rope onto, I believe it was Raquel Rodriguez and Shayna Baszler, and potentially but without Nia Jax in the mix.
Without Nia Jax, you're right.
So I thought that, but like again, I thought that was a nice, impactful way to finish the match. So I thought, for what it was, solid, but I think we're going to get into Raw later, that they really didn't think too hard creatively about booking a contender here because they just picked another one of these women to be Ripley's next opponent. All right, well, after that, we had John Cena versus Solo Sikoa. Going into this match, then I see we had differing opinions of how it was going to play out.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I was backing the boy, John Cena, to sort of do his never give up, never surrender type of thing and get his first singles win on pay-per-view in 5 years or whatever it was.
The last time it was in Saudi Arabia as well.
Oh my, well, see, that should have been good fortune for him then, but during the match, it turned out that he was really up against it. He was giving Sikoa a nice, fight for the majority, and they were really selling I feel like the impact of both of their finishes with Cena's AA and Sikoa's spike, because they were both managing to evade them consistently. But then once Cody finally landed his spike, that was essentially lights out for John Cena, because he did it not just once, not just twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, not even 5 or 6, 7 spikes. And then there were another 4 on top of that as well, because there were 4 initial spikes, and then he just went ham on him, and he hit 7 of them.
You ever played a wrestling game where you put infinity finishes on at the beginning and then just go to town on your opponent?
It was insane. And at that point, I thought to myself, God, he's not going to kick out of this, is he? And thankfully he didn't. So I think that would have been disastrous if he did kick out. But Solo Sikoa got the win here.
Yeah, great for him. Great for him. Can I also bring up that there was a small but vocal anti-Cena contingent noticeable in the crowd. There was some John Cena sucks chanting during the entrance song. And then also I think there was an instance of let's go Cena, Cena sucks happening. So that was actually surprising. I haven't heard that in a very long time.
Maybe they've just caught up with it on their feed on the network.
Potentially.
Well, so that brings us into the next match of the night, which was Rey Mysterio defending his US Championship against Logan Paul. Thanasi, you've made your thoughts known about the idea of Logan Paul getting the title. Spoilers, he did get it, but what did you think of the match itself?
Look, overall, I think we saw a good showing from Logan Paul, right? And I think one of the highlights that's been making the rounds is the spot where Mysterio was about to spike himself off a springboard moonsault, and Logan managed to go in to catch him. Maybe he was 2 steps too far back, but he corrected it and effectively saved the legend from spiking himself.
Yeah, I want to quickly bring that up because I completely agree with you, which is that his inexperience led to the wrong placement, but his wherewithal to actually go forward, catch him, showed real expertise of a guy that is still quite a bit of a novice when it comes to wrestling. He's only had a handful of matches. So I was very impressed with that, and the fact that they were able to sort of get back into the rhythm of things after that.
Yeah. But look, some of the offense that he hit as well, right? Like he noticed, I don't know if you picked up on this. He hit a fireman's carry into a rolling senton and then a lion salt, which is a little bit Kenny Omega, right?
Yeah.
So we saw that. He also hit a gorilla press and a warrior splash. So that's another kind of reference to Ultimate Warrior. The shoulder backbreaker, like Bruno Sammartino.
Yep.
So basically, he's wrestling like a wrestling fan would wrestle, right? Like you go out there and you hit big moves of wrestlers that you know.
I would even go a step further and say he's wrestling like a guy who's very new to it would, because I honestly think that he watched a Kenny Omega match or something and said, "Oh, I like that. I'm going to take that in." The Warrior thing, he probably thought, "Oh, I'm just gonna take that as well." Sammartino, oh, he's a big guy. What does he do? So I reckon he's just looked around for the big names and said, "What do they do?" And I'll just take it and give it a go.
Yeah, it was a little bit like he customized his moveset.
Yeah.
I think it was Jake the Snake Roberts was the one who provided advice to younger wrestlers that, or maybe I think it was to RVD, you don't have to go 100% the whole time, right? You can bust out some good moves, but the whole crowd does not need to see everything you can do in the confines of one match.
Yeah.
Which is certainly like a very WWE philosophy. Potentially we can discuss at some point later on in our podcast series, like the whole contrasting philosophies, because you know that on AEW pay-per-view, they do go absolutely all out and tends to end up with injuries.
And good matches to give them their due as well.
Indeed. But of course, if I can just point to the finish of this one, Ray hit an avalanche sunset flip powerbomb, followed by Code Red, and then a Logan Paul lackey fed the brass knucks, which Ray smacked out of his opponent's hands. But the genius Santos Escobar, who came to even the odds, left the thrown out brass knucks on the ring apron. So off the distraction, Paul gets the knucks anyway and uses them to strike as a reversal to the West Coast pop after the 619 was hit. So he no-sold the 619 and got a dirty win. I think that finish marred the match a little bit, but good match overall for what we know we were expecting.
I agree. And I'm curious to see if on SmackDown they play into the angle of potentially this being a breakup thing with Santos Escobar, because to me, it felt very weird for him to stop the brass knuckles just to then leave it on the ring, you know, like that felt to me very weird.
Look, I hear you. Potentially Carlito will factor into the breakup as well. I don't know, maybe it was intentional, but we'll see. We'll see what happens on SmackDown.
All right. Well, the next match we had was Io Sky versus Bianca Belair for the WWE Women's Championship. This was, in my opinion, not as good as their previous pay-per-view encounter, but it was still a very solid showing. But I think it's fair to say that the thing that really made the rounds from this match was not the outcome, but rather the return of one Kairi Sane to WWE, helping out her old friend Io Sky get the win. This was, I'm elated to see Kairi Sane back, and I'm even more excited to see that elbow drop on a consistent basis again on WWE TV. And I like the idea that they're feeding into that Bayley is the one that sort of kicked her out of WWE, or like beat her on the way out. So
Yes, long-term storytelling.
I'm sure that's exactly what they were thinking about, and it wasn't just let's bring her back with her old friend. But I'm very excited about this proposition. And then after that, we had the semi-main of the card, which was Cody Rhodes versus Damian Priest. This was another match which, to be honest, if you've seen any Judgment Day match on pay-per-view the last couple of months, it was like that. The two have a nice sort of back and forth exchange before the Judgment Day extras come out and factor into the match. And at one point, it was JD McDonough and Finn Balor, and I believe Mysterio, all three coming out, but then Jey Uso managed to even the odds, taking out all three of them on the outside. Cody Rhodes hit his Cody Cutter, Bionic Elbow for a 2 at one point. Then he hit a Cody Cutter from the top rope, again for another near fall. But then he hit his trio, a trio of Crossroads for the win. So the American Nightmare comes out on top on this one.
American Nightmare came up on top, and to add insult to injury, did you notice that towards the beginning of the match, the crowd was chanting, "Where is your briefcase?" to Damian Priest, because as I said before, Sami Zayn had stolen it. So that was just funny. But the crowd also singing along really accurately and really loudly to Downstate during the entrance. So I was pretty impressed with the crowd overall. A couple of moments during the night that they were quite impressive.
Clearly, they did their homework.
Yeah.
Whether that meant watching the shows or just beforehand, but yeah, no, they've been great. This leads us into the main event of the evening, which was Roman Reigns versus LA Knight. Yeah, for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. And I say this was probably what we hope is the making of LA Knight in terms of being a recognized star in the company. But I want you to sort of take us through the match, and let's discuss if this did make him even in loss, or if this was just another, you're going to the back of the card again. But I just want to quickly highlight as well, what I liked is that they did something that I haven't seen a lot of lately, which was during the introductions, they didn't just silently gesture and brag. They were trash talking each other the entire time, which really, to me, helped elevate the animosity between these two and make it feel like, oh, we're about to prepare for a fight here.
Yeah, it felt like it was going to be scrappy. But it did feel exactly what your point about, is this just going to be another one of you lose, you're at the back of the line? And I personally, when we talk offline, I use the term transitional number one contender as an adaptation, or as a paraphrasing of the transitional champion nomenclature. And Cole and Wade Barrett did make reference to this in their own way. They discussed how Wade Barrett knows about one-shot world title matches, basically, one-time number one contenders, with his experience. So it was a little bit kind of putting it out there of like, we're actually recognizing what the very worst possible result can be here, where it's like, this is your one career highlight. But I think overall with this match, it was not a lot of like special, like we've seen the same Roman match on every pay-per-view, right? So like some of this, like, the only difference was the fact that he hit a rock bottom, right? That was the big new highlight. But I mean, we did see LA Knight hit that step up superplex off the top rope. That looks beautiful. He did hit the people's elbow, so both sides had borrowed from the Rock's offense. Solo and Jimmy did provide a distraction that led to the spear, which LA Knight kicked out of. That's a point to make, right? So kicking out of the spear these days is a big deal, right? So I think it was Mark Henry even made a point that in spite of losing, the fact that he lost with shenanigans or with distractions, that he didn't lose clean, indicates that there's protection going on, and means WWE recognizes LA Knight is a big deal. And then
Mark Henry said that?
Mark Henry said
Wow.
that. Yeah, I saw that on the internet.
Well, good for him.
Roman Reigns brought back the use of the guillotine as well. LA Knight powers out of that, hitting BFT, and then that's when Jimmy pulled the Tribal Chief's leg onto the rope, right? So that was the only thing, right? That was another point, really drilling home that point that LA Knight is able to keep up.
Yeah.
And he put Jimmy through the announce table for having done that. but then ends up eating a spear through the barricade from Roman right from the outset of that. And in the ring, this sets up yet another spear and the 3 count, 1, 2, 3, hashtag, and still, I don't think we're that surprised. But what did you make of his showing, of LA Knight's showing in particular?
I think he stepped up and he did what we hoped he'd do. Like LA Knight is not a wrestler in the sense of a Seth Rollins or a Kenny Omega, where you're waiting to see the spectacle of every little bit of offense he pulls off. But he's one of those guys that he makes his offense known, but but his charisma and his popularity is what really elevates it. Kind
It's
of
more
like
like
The
a
Rock,
Cena.
more like what The Rock did with his moves.
Yeah.
Like The Rock wasn't a great wrestler in the way the others are either. So I feel like he did step up, and I know that it happens with a lot of his competitors, but it helps LA Knight's credibility that he was screwed out of it. It would help even more if it didn't happen to a lot of Roman's opponents in this year, like Sammy, like Cody, and such. But it does help because I saw a post and it said that of Roman's defenses on screen, 16 of them have been clean and 19 have been through shenanigans.
Mm-hmm.
And even so, you'd rather be defeated via shenanigans than just beaten clean, especially for a guy like LA Knight who is aspiring to have future opportunities as well.
Yeah, I can see the appeal of that. I think one of my just high level reflections is you notice that exactly what we're saying here, that people like Roman or people like LA Knight, they're not your working men's wrestlers, right? They're not your workhorse wrestlers. And it's very apropos that therefore they are in the main event because WWE values those
Yeah, they
charisma
do.
non-wrestlers, right? They're
Yeah.
the good wrestlers, not great wrestlers, but large personalities. Whereas the much better wrestlers opened the card with the other world title match.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to reflect on that.
Okay, well, on that note, let's move into this week's Raw. And just a quick rundown of what happened on this week's edition. So it started with Seth Rollins, who sort of thanked Drew McIntyre for the clean match that they had instead of bringing in the Judgment Day. And then he also thanked Sammy for stopping Damien Priest from cashing in on him. And he said that he wanted to give Sammy a title shot, which Zayn then accepted, and it was booked for later on as the main event. The opening contest saw the Judgment Day beat the New Day, so we've seen who the superior Day team is in WWE now. And this was followed by Akira Tozawa versus Shinsuke Nakamura. Shinsuke obviously got the win here, but the thing that I found notable is that in his match, we did hear audibly from the crowd chants for CM Punk, which we haven't really discussed it in depth, and I say because when it comes to Punk and these things, we try to just wait to see if it actually materializes. But I have to be honest, it did get me excited, even if I know it's still very much not a reality at this point. After that, we had a four-way to decide the number one contender for the IC title, and this was competed between The Miz, Ricochet, Ivar, and Bronson Reed. It had a very messy finish, in my opinion, where the Miz rolled up Reed as Ivar pinned Ricochet following his moonsault. Ricochet, the ref just counted both together. Ricochet kicked out at 2, but the Bronson Reed didn't, and that meant that the Miz won. But it was confusion. That was the problem.
I accept the confusion point. When I watch it back in slow motion, within the confines of kayfabe, if this were a real sport, I would say congratulations to the referee, because you look at the replay, he looks at both shoulders on the mat before he counts each time. So the ref makes the exact correct call within the confines of kayfabe. Now, if this was the right booking decision, that's a whole separate thing, right? But I just wanted to make that point.
And look, to be honest, it probably was because you'd rather see the Miz or Ivar get a shot just because Bronson Reed and Ricochet have had opportunities. So I guess, works fine. But after that, we had DIY versus the Creed brothers, and the Creed brothers actually got the win here. It was announced that they are officially on the Raw brand, and they got the win after Ludwig Kaiser intervened and attacked Johnny Gargano behind the refs' back, and the Creeds managed to get the win after this with the Brutus Ball. But it seems like DIY and Imperium have only just gotten started, Thanasi.
Well, there's a lot of fresh blood coming onto the roster, and I think that was the theme generally on the show. There was a lot of fresh stuff happening, a lot of new stuff, very changing up the structure. And I'm pretty sure even throughout this episode, a lot more of the in-ring segments were wrestling matches rather than in-ring promos. I wasn't keeping count as I usually do, but I did get the feeling that it was a bit more of like a collision style, where it's like it's focused more on when they're out in the ring, they're wrestling, and backstage segments are used for promos and exchanges of words.
I have a suspicion that this is just a one-off or an irregularity of it. But yeah, we'll see in the future episodes how it goes. But look, moving on the card, there was a women's battle royal to decide the number one contenders match, which essentially was just the women's locker room, minus Becky Lynch, who got attacked by Xia Li beforehand. So I think that they are preserving Becky Lynch as Rhea Ripley's opponent for Mania. That's my call from now.
That would be a pretty good call to make.
I think that's what they're going for, because to me that makes sense as well. Because whenever Becky faces her, you're going to think it could win, so you might as well save it for the biggest show of them all. But for this battle royal, the winner turned out to be Zoe Stark, who last eliminated Shayna Baszler. And so we've got one of the competitors from the Fatal Five-Way going against Rhea Ripley 1-on-1 now at Survivor Series WarGames, which to me is kind of like it just proves the point of the Fatal Five-Way just showed they had no real direction as to how they were going to go about it. But anyway, let's move on to the main event of the night, which was Seth Rollins versus Sami Zayn for the World Heavyweight Championship. This was, in my opinion, a very good showing between the two wrestlers. They gave them lots of time, so they really let them breathe and have a nice quality outing together. There was a nice moment for me, like just a moment that I thought shows the professionalism and elegance of these two, was after Seth Rollins hit a buckle bomb, which he was setting up for his stomp. And then when he goes against the ropes, Sami Zayn just very smoothly lifts him up for the Blue Thunder Bomb. And I just thought that whole little sequence was just done to perfection in terms of the placement and the footwork of the two wrestlers. And that to me was just emblematic of the whole match of just how good they work together.
And I think on the point about the Blue Thunder Bomb, I'm not sure if you're aware, that's the move that Sammy used on the pre-show to defeat JD McDonough. He hit the Helluva Kick and then hit the Blue Thunder Bomb to win. So maybe that's why he got so smooth, used it so smoothly against Rollins.
And well, Sami Zayn as well, busting out some Chris Jericho moves, bringing out the Lion Tamer and then the Boston Crab, or as he calls his, the Walls of Jericho. And Seth got the win, but via a roll-up. So it seems like, and they have been building this idea that Sami Zayn one day will be world champion. And I see this is probably the first chance of saying, like, you know, he's nearly there. He's close, not just yet. And post-match, though, this is when everything got interesting. This was what you've predicted from the beginning, Thanasi, so I've got to give you credit. We had a Judgment Day brawl with Sami, Seth Rollins, and then Jey Uso and Cody Rhodes. Officials and security came out to separate all of the wrestlers to stop the brawl, when Adam Pearce came into the ring and said he's sick of the games between these wrestlers, sick of all the games they've been playing, and announces they will face each other once and for all at Survivor Series in WarGames. And apart from wishing William Regal could have been there to say it, Adam Pearce did a valiant job.
He really, really tried. Good on him.
He definitely tried. It's not the same, but the other thought I had is, this is Cody's wet dream, right?
Well, this is the match that his father invented, right?
Yeah.
So this is going to be awesome. I mean, it just opens up so many possibilities to have this here. I guess a part of me was wondering if they were going to mix the Bloodline storyline in with this, but it seems like it's going to be a Monday Night Raw specific storyline because they've got enough. They've got enough here. They've got a 4-on-4. I mean, the promo package over the weekend was saying 10 men, 5-on-5 as the soundbite from Corey Graves. So I don't know if we're going to have more people added, but we've seen a 4-on-4 in the past. We've seen a 3-on-3-on-3 in the past as well. So I don't know if you've got strong views on that or anything else from the main event.
I think as it is already fine. I like the idea of teasing the 5-on-5 because it opens the door for, obviously CM Punk is the absolute dream scenario for a lot of people, especially in Chicago. But that even opens the door for a guy that we've all been waiting for a year and a half, roughly. And that is Randall Keith Orton.
Randall Keith.
If they do sell the idea of there's an extra competitor for the babyface side, and they're teasing it onto the night, the same way that Kevin Owens years ago came to the aid of the babyfaces in the NXT WarGames against the Undisputed Era. I think having someone like Randy Orton or, dare I say it, CM Punk show up would just blow everyone's minds.
I think it would be absolutely unbelievable. It would be... Look, let's not speculate too much. However, let's just be settled for the point that, yes, there is room to grow and there is room to build. I feel like one of the unfortunate things is that this is one of the most highly anticipated Survivor Series in many, many years. And it's a shame that it's in such close proximity to the preceding pay-per-view. It's like a 3-week gap or something. We should have had longer, frankly. Maybe we should have pushed Survivor Series back, or ideally not have had Crown Jewel at all, to be honest, or at least have had Crown Jewel earlier. But yeah, I'm very, very hot for this Survivor Series, but it's not quite clear just yet how much they're leaning into the brand warfare aspect, right? Because this is the first match. I mean, we've got some title matches coming up, so it might not be quite there yet.
Well, that's been a lot discussed about WWE, and I think it's fair to say we're very excited to see where it's moving in the future. But let's move on to AEW, which has its own pay-per-view coming up, and the action's all leading towards that. But let's start with the latest episode of Collision. So, Thanasi, do you want to take us through Collision from this week?
Yeah, I'll take us back to Saturday at 11 or so for Australian time. So last Saturday, the show opened on Collision with a brawl between AR Fox and his opponent, Swerve Strickland. Fox hits a massive dive off the stage, roughly within a minute of the broadcast actually going live or something like that. And then Swerve also hits a diving double stomp in the ring. That's the move that actually gets him the victory. But after that, the Gates of Agony and then Ricky Starks and Big Bill come out, as do FTR and Le Faction Ingobernables. They all have like a big brawl, and that's actually teasing the main event of the night, which is actually going to be an 8-man tag that goes across all of those teams. Second segment and match of the evening is the Kingdom versus Enhancement Talent. Basically, Roddy interrupts the ring announcement, just saying, Dasha. So he's really leading into this character. I think that they made a reference that it was like Streetcar Named Desire, where he's like yelling out the name like
Stella,
like Stella by Stan. But Mike Bennett ended up hitting the Death Valley Driver, and then Matt Taven hit the assist on Bennett's pile driver for the neck strong victory. Third match, Lance Archer versus Darby Allin. So Lance and the Snake are back, Jake the Snake Roberts. So it's great to see that pairing return to the screen. Lance hits a release vertical suplex on the ramp, which was quite brutal for Darby. It's a big spot for him to take. And he also hits 2 choke slams, one in the center of the ring and another one on the ring apron. So Darby just playing ragdoll, basically. But Darby does get to push back because he ends up getting the victory with Code Red off the top rope. And it was one of those not often enough used moments where it's the kick out on 3. So there is a 3, and then you kick out basically at 3.01. And after this, Jake reveals his new client, not replacing, but complementing Lance Archer. It's Dutch and Vincent of the Righteous. So that might be a small little family there getting going. The Acclaimed then cut a promo to celebrate their 69th day as champions. Read into that as you will.
That's
and of
perfect,
course,
I must say.
oh, it works out lovely that it was broadcast on a day that they actually have content, right?
Absolutely.
And that featured a couple of puns that I shan't repeat. But what I will repeat is that MJF appeared on the screen, wishing Max the best from behind the scenes for the celebration. And then after that, Dalton, just as they're about to close, Dalton Castle and the boys interrupt them, setting up an impromptu trios championship defense. And the finish is a Fame Asa, sidewalk slam, and mic drop for the feel-good retention. Fifth segment, Kip Sabian and the Workhorsemen take on Mark Briscoe and his brand new partners, Dustin Rhodes and Keith Lee. Briscoe ends up hitting the elbow drop, or the froggy bow, I think he calls it, to pin Kip Sabian. And then he also hits a Phoenix Splash on the outside. And I should mention that point because that was actually pretty awesome, right? Finish a Phoenix Splash to the outside. But in a backstage interview, which I think was a slightly more important part of this particular thing, is that Briscoe issued a challenge to Jay White, not for the actual championship, more like a number one contenders Steeler situation. And Dimitri, I just want to ask you a question here because I told you, because I watched Collision before you, to listen for something that Mark Briscoe says. Did you pick up on the reference, or shall I point it out for our loyal listeners?
I think I picked up on the reference, but I'm going to let you say it and we'll see if we matched, because maybe I picked up on something entirely different.
Okay, well, what I picked up on is that as part of his ramblings, as part of his backstage promo, Mark Briscoe made a reference to Miles Finch's 70-inch plasma screen. Now, this, of course, is a reference. He didn't actually even mention the name of the movie, right? So that was just so good for anyone who did pick it up, someone as sad as me who did pick it up. And that was Elf from 2003, where all he did was say Miles Finch's 70-inch plasma screen. And if you know, you know. But of course, you come to the podcast to find out things you don't know. So that's just something that I did want to point out. Was that what you picked up on too?
It was, and I found it very coincidental because that's what you said. And then something immediately happened afterwards that I thought, wait, is this what he meant as well? And that was when he did his little into the camera. And it reminded me of, for all our Australian listeners, of this segment from a current affair where this old man complained about dogs in his neighborhood and how they're always going. So I thought he meant the elf thing, but then I also thought, oh, is he talking about this?
Yeah, I think if I could just make an analogy here, definitely if you're an international viewer, Google it, say like an Australian man complains about dog or something like that.
Complains about dog barking.
Yeah, a current affair is our 60 minutes equivalent, so it's not an actual current affairs show. It's just one that not quite satirized. They try to do it seriously, but it just comes out a little bit strange. In any case, back to the wrestling. In the semi-main, Emi Sakura takes on Willow Nightingale, and Willow hits a Death Valley driver on the outside, and then a missile drop kick for 2, but does end up winning with her patented gut wrench powerbomb. And in the main event of the evening, it's 8-man. It's Ricky Starks, Big Bill, the 2 men from Gates of Agony, both of FTR, and then representation from Le Faction Ingobernables, Roosh, and Preston Vance. And the crowd was really hot for FTR on this one. But before I just go into what happened in the match, and we can come back to this after, notice that there were no major main event singles appearances. So it was just an amalgamation of baby faces and heel teams. And that seemed to be the theme of the evening as well. It felt a little bit, I hate to say, a little bit house showy. Just kind of like, these are the people that we've got available for us. A little bit like a Rampage, actually. In any case, we can come back to that after. During the match, Ricky hits both old school and the apron leg drop. So he's busting out the Undertaker offense in quick succession. Roosh helps Dax hit the Shatter Machine and then delivers the corner two-legged drop kick for the victory. And in spite of being victorious in an eight-man tag, LFI refused to shake hands with FTR. And then after they leave the ring, the House of Black come to attack FTR post-match. And LFI don't make the save. It's actually BCC who make the save in the form of Claudio and Wheeler Yuta. And again, like a very, very faction-heavy convolution. And it just feels like they've got it there for faction warfare. There's a lot of people that they've got access to, a lot of teams that they've got access to, but they're not leaning into it in the way that I feel like they should. Did you have any views on, did you pick up on this kind of like, it was a bit of a nothing episode, a bit of a throwaway, kind of like a Rampage style?
It's not only did I pick up on it, it's a big worry of mine because look, let's be real. When Punk left, I think a lot of people thought, well, what is Collision going to be? Is it just going to become another one of AEW's content? Because what we all liked about Collision is that it felt different.
Yeah.
Not that it meant that we hated Dynamite and all the other content they do, but just that it felt like a different show. And it's even in WWE, Raw and SmackDown, they don't feel that apart. It's just different talent for the most part. And so there was something very exciting about the idea of just completely tonally different shows that work their own way. And this was one of those episodes that it made me think, we're on the path here of Collision becoming another Rampage. It just exists to serve more content for the channel, but that it's not doing much else to actually sort of grab your attention.
See,
So,
you and I are not always on the same page, but I think we definitely are on this point. Sorry to interrupt you, but I just thought I'd make that interesting reflection. We're not as bad as Alvarez and Meltzer, but we do have differing opinions. But on this one, we're exactly in unison. Sorry for interrupting.
yes. And look, without trying to take shots here, but I think there are times that we're more eloquent in our thoughts than certain David Meltzer.
We try.
We certainly try our best. But let's move on to this week's Dynamite. So you talk about no notable singles matches. Well, this one started with a most notable singles match, which was MJF versus Daniel Garcia for the AEW World Championship, which MJF obviously retained using his submission, in this case, Salt of the Earth. But I do want to give a shout out to Daniel Garcia, who had a good match, but also notably hit a one-armed pile driver, which I have to say, credit to. In a company in which they all hit the pile drivers, it's hard to make it seem unique or different. And in this case, it actually was a nice little spot, I felt. Following that, Darby Allin and Sting wrestled the Outrunners, two randoms, as far as I'm aware. And I thought, obviously Darby Allin and Sting got the win. Sting actually got the win for his team with the Scorpion Deathlock. And I thought, now that we know we're on the final road of Sting's career, should we really be giving him job matches, or should we just give him, good stuff?
Well, I think the idea is like how much good stuff is there to give him. But I think this was just a lot of, just providing a bit of a feel-good moment and for him to get his legs warm. That's how I saw it.
I think you're right, but I also believe that because he's going to wrestle on this week's Collision coming up against the team of Lance Archer and the Righteous, but give the guy a night off. Don't make him wrestle twice in the span of 4 days or whatever it is. Let him have. But anyway, it's fine. After that, we had Tony Storm and Hikaru Shida in a pre-recorded contract signing with Tony Schiavone, which I actually thought was a really nice segment. Brief, but to the point. And actually helped set up for me, elevate the stakes of their upcoming match at Full Gear. So I thought this was quite good. Did you agree?
Yeah, I thought it was good. I mean, the chemistry that they had actually did quite work all right. It was a coherent clash of styles, if I can put it that way. Like it felt very much like it was Tony Storm in her element, but Hikaru really pushing and prodding. And I did like that we got the return of the line of chin up, tits out, and watch for the shoe. But Hikaru Shida knew to watch for the shoe. Like she grabbed it and took it out of Tony Storm's hand, I believe.
Following that, we had a match between Swerve Strickland and Penta, which Swerve managed to get the win in. And afterwards, Adam Page actually beat up Strickland as sort of getting some revenge back after Swerve invaded his house last week. And then following that, we had a backstage segment between Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho with the Young Bucks, where they sort of just set up a match between the two teams at AEW Full Gear.
Can I just say, what makes me keen for this is that it feels fresh, right? Maybe it's not brand new insofar as these people have interacted before, but it just feels like a bit of a shift, and I like that. Just to get something a little bit different, just to add in a new dimension. I like when we change things up, like what I noticed with Raw, right? So I appreciate that aspect to it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, talking about changing things up, we had a match between Samoa Joe and Keith Lee for the ROH TV Championship, which
Meat.
Two big men going at it, and they had a solid match. And I was actually surprised that Joe put Lee to sleep, which I thought, wow, like that's a big scalp for him.
He put him to sleep after shaking hands with him as well, right? So he showed him the respect and then just absolutely annihilated the bloke in the finish.
But after the match, it was even more interesting because Samoa Joe took to the mic and said that he's serious and he's got his sights set for higher honors. And for him to do that, he needs to truly concentrate. And he vacated the ROH TV Championship, which I thought, big call, nice. But I like it. I like it because I think now, for a lot of people, I think they wouldn't have suspected he would hold both at the same time. Certainly capable, but they wouldn't see it. And I think now he's really throwing it out there like, no, I'm going for this. And now there's even more intrigue set for a potential rematch with MJF.
I see. I'm a little bit conflicted. One is a disagreement in principle because he's had such a dominant run where it's been like it's more than a year, right, that he's been champion.
I want to say it's like over 600 days, even
something like that. And I believe he also has the record for the most days of. Maybe I can look it up in a moment and come back to it later. But I think he's got the most days of the Ring of Honor World Title.
I think
so now he's
I think
got the
right.
record for the World Television Title as well. And the thing is, it could have been an opportunity for either a Ring of Honor guy or even an AEW guy just to have that really big push by defeating him. And it's because he's had such a dominant run, defeated a lot of people, vacating it means that whoever takes it next is just going to look like a weak champion. Unless it's vacant for a significant amount of time and goes to a tournament or whatever. But that's just like my inherent disagreement with vacating the title. But from the other side, I completely accept your point and I completely agree that by having him not hold the belt anymore, it makes it feel more believable that he could be world champion. And frankly, he'd be a wonderful world champion, in my opinion. But certainly just like the believability does really jump straight up. And that was really shocking. I mean, like I think I was cooking while I was watching the episode and I full turned around like with my mids being seared, just a bit sauteing it there. And I was like, what? You're vacating the strap? Came a little bit out of nowhere, frankly.
It did. And we'll see what the future of the ROH TV Championship is from here on before we like really make our determination. My bold prediction is just that it's going to go to an ROH guy or a mid-card AEW guy, so I don't think it's going to be a star of the same caliber of Samoa Joe that picks it up. But we'll see how that plays out. The next match we had after this was the Guns versus the Bollywood Boys, of all people. That actually shocked me. I unfortunately have lots of trauma from the 2017 Jinder Mahal WWE Championship run, so I remember the Bollywood Boys all too well back then. And so I thought, oh wow, these guys are people that have some notoriety. Maybe they'll have a match for a couple minutes. Nah, it was finished very quickly. The Guns got a hit 310 to Yuma almost straight away to get the win, and then basically said to MJF, "We're going to beat you at Full Gear." So I thought, okay, well, not much here to report.
I'm just going to point out that I did look it up. Samoa Joe does have the record for longest Ring of Honor World Championship reign as well.
He's a legend. He's a legend of the game. With the next match after this was Julia Hart versus Red Velvet, with Julia Hart getting the win with her moonsault, and there was sort of a post-match sort of confrontation, so to speak, between her and Sky Blue, which eventually sort of got stopped with the intervention of the TBS champion, Chris Statlander, and Willow Nightingale, who came to sort of check up on Red Velvet. But after this, then I see there was something that I know you're going to love, and that was the announcement of a new AEW star, and that is one Mariah May.
Double M.
Mm.
Oh, no, genuinely, when it happened, I was like, all right, we have to make a reference to this on the show. Of course, we are making reference to one of the dumbest moments. My immature sense of humor just loved when the boys from Cultaholic Wrestling in their podcast, in unison, were discussing on how to pronounce the name. They thought it was either Maria May or Mariah May, and then settled on it is indeed Mariah May, nicknamed MM or Double M, and all in unison. They do it with me. They went,
Mm.
so this is our homage to the Cultaholic Wrestling podcast.
I thought I had to mention that for your sake. But after that, we had the main event of the night, which was Jay White versus Mark Briscoe, with Jay White getting the win. Notably in the match, lots of interference from Bullet Club Gold. The two had a really solid showing, in my opinion. But obviously, Jay White was going to get the win here. They haven't spent the last 3 weeks building up his match with MJF just to give it to Mark Briscoe, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, of course.
Post-match, MJF actually came out and he took out the other 3 members of Bullet Club Gold with the Dynamite Diamond Ring. And then Jay White sort of scurried back to sort of evade any sort of confrontation with MJF. And the show closed with some masked assailants beating up the Acclaimed backstage. And then MJF rushing to the back, checking up on them, and then Joe coming in like a real dastardly villain, just going, "Oh, look at this! Oh, this is not good," and then walking back out. I've got to say, we make that last point sound a lot more comedic than it was presented. It was actually presented
very
fine.
sinister.
Yes, I agree, and it's got me wondering who is this devil going to turn out to be? Like we made reference to him earlier about potentially showing up at WarGames. One of the rumors going out is CM Punk being the devil. Now, I don't think that's the case, but it's got to be someone high profile at this point, right? It's because it's quite the big feud.
Look, I've got 2 comments to make. One is that I do have a suspicion on the identity, but also I just want to make this point that last time it was BCG getting attacked. This time it's the Acclaimed getting attacked. BCG were always MJF's opponents. The Acclaimed, however, were his friends this past week. So either friend or foe, as long as you're near MJF, it seems you're just going to get attacked. So it's not clear, are they defending him or are they trying to, when I say they, I'm referring to the devil. Is the devil defending him or supporting him, or is it trying to attack and intimidate him? However, on your point of, is it CM Punk? Well, he made 2 very, very subtle points that probably mean nothing, but confirmation bias will tell you that in his promo in slurging on BCG after beating them down, MJF mentioned 2 points. I am the real world champion, which of course is how CM Punk fashioned himself. Now, of course, that was subtle enough because it just means that even though Jay White holds the physical belt, I am the champ, right? I'm the recognized champion. And he also says that you guys like to dress up as a top guy. And of course, top guys is how FTR refer to themselves. And they're CM Punk's mates. So maybe they're part of, these masked assailants or something happening there as well. It's not enough evidence. I'm a stats major. It's not enough evidence to support this. But it's nice to speculate about it.
Absolutely. And look, whatever happens, I think there's intrigue here, which means that they better stick the landing, in my opinion.
Look, I think we're going to find out soon, to be honest with you. I think we're going to get a reveal very soon. And it's
You
just
think
like
at the pay-per-view?
potential or at or around the pay-per-view is how I would phrase it, right? Because you've got this offshoot of the storyline where Adam Cole is encouraging MJF to accept Samoa Joe's offer to team up. I actually thought that the offer was to team up in the 6-man, but apparently it's like an offer to team up at the pay-per-view to defend the straps.
I think it was just an offer at any point where he needs him. Because
Right.
I had the same interpretation last week. It was team up with him for the 6-man, but obviously it just seems like just take the help.
Yeah.
In whichever way it comes. But that brings us to the end of Dynamite this week. All in all, I thought it was an okay episode. I think there were some very good matches, good moments. I think though that you can kind of feel like we're building up to Full Gear and we're just trying to get there, and then they're going to reset again, like as all programming in wrestling does do, obviously. All right, well, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, we'll be reviewing the go-home shows for AEW Full Gear, as well as giving our predictions of what's going to happen at the card. We might even throw in a potential devil prediction of whether they reveal it and who it might be. So there's plenty to talk about, plenty to speculate and sort of have some fun with these shows. Wouldn't you agree, Thanasi?
Oh, certainly, I agree. I'm actually really keen for it. I think the build for Full Gear is going to have a lot of interest to it, given that basically like a week before Full Gear, we've got Survivor Series building up, so the WWE side will have some good content happening, hopefully.
Well, Thanasi, thank you again for your company.
Thank you kindly.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.